Hello and welcome to another video review. This is Nuclear Dawn for PC and Mac. This was originally a source mod that Interwave Studios eventually released as a full standalone product on September 26th of this year, 2011. And it's available through Steam. Now, it is interesting because it's a first-person shooter and real-time strategy game hybrid, which we really don't see all that much. The only one that I can think of right off the top of my head is Savage. Well, Savage 1 and 2, I should say. Which are fairly similar games in some aspects, but they're really a very different thing, and they were made before this was even thought up. So it's interesting to see more genre mashing like this, and that begs the question, though, how well was it executed? Well, the visuals certainly speak to being fairly amateur in development. Animations in particular have this kind of robotic quality. They're not terrible by any means, don't get me wrong. It's just that there are little instances here and there where the animations look a little robotic or sluggish or just odd, and they don't flow particularly well in some aspects, especially with the iron sight animation where it's just a very robotic shift to the iron sights and then back to the hip fire position. I don't particularly like that, but by and large the animations do fit the game fairly decently, and they do a decent job of being smooth and flowing nicely enough that you don't really notice them and have anything against them. Textures are pretty decent res. They're not particularly high res, but they're pretty good res for a Source game, which kind of surprised me because even Valve has a little bit of trouble with the textures on Source. They look a little bit behind, and they do here as well, but you can kind of understand it because it is an indie game. As for the modeling, they did a really good job with that. Just everything looks very nice and detailed. Then you have the environments themselves. Now, this is one thing that I don't particularly like. Now, while the environments themselves actually look very nice, they're well designed, they actually have a very nice artistic style to them, the problem is they look too clean. This game is supposed to be post-apocalyptic, and instead it looks like just kind of Counter-Strike or Neo Tokyo or something like that, where it's kind of pristine. I mean, that stuff might be a little bit run down, but by and large the maps look like something out of, say, Call of Duty or something. They don't look particularly post-apocalyptic. That said, I can't fault them for that because the maps themselves actually do look pretty nice. And then there's the sound design, which overall is pretty good. There's not a lot of music in this game, but what little of it there is decent. It's not particularly amazing. It's just kind of generic music for this sort of thing. But it does do a decent job. And it's really only during the menu, so you don't really need to worry about that. But the sound effects are actually really nice. They did a really good job with making it not sound like a Source mod, for instance. Instead, it sounds like an actual professional game, and they did a really good job with that. And the gun sounds in particular are nice and beefy. I like this, because a lot of game developers seem to think that guns need to sound either realistic or pathetic. I don't know why they do that, they just do it. And they did a good job with Nuclear Dawn of making the gun sound effects actually nice and beefy when they need to be. And if the gun is fairly weak, then they actually do sound fairly weak. So the sounds are appropriate as opposed to being really wildly off in the realm of craziness or something. That said, explosions are a little weak. They don't really rock you or anything, and that just kind of... It's a little disappointing, but it's not that big of a deal. Voice acting, it's really... you don't have much to speak of. I mean, it's just little voice commands here and there that you'll hear through the radios and such. Sort of like in Counter-Strike. But it's decent quality. There's nothing particularly noteworthy that's good or bad about that, though. So overall, I'd say the sound presentation, pretty solid. Much like the visuals, pretty solid. But what it really comes down to is, of course, the gameplay itself, because this is a multiplayer-only game, and as a result, the storyline is entirely background. Basically, you fight as one of two factions, either the Empire, which you could basically say is the Soviet Union, or the Consortium, which you could basically say is the West during the Cold War. And these two factions are fighting it out in 2049 in a World War III, basically, where nuclear weapons have been used and kind of wiped out a lot of the Earth, basically. That's your entire storyline right there. You really don't notice anything in game to give you any indication, so you'd have to look it up to actually know that. But anyway, what really matters here is that this is a first-person shooter and real-time strategy game hybrid, and that means that you have one character being the commander and on each team. What their job is to do the real-time strategy bit. They place buildings, make sure that people can get orders, and thus they'll get extra points when they complete objectives and such. And they'll build defenses for their bases, as well as expand them to eventually encroach upon the enemy's territory and kind of just crush them and provide that ability to crush them. So that's your entirety of the real-time strategy bit. It's not particularly robust. There aren't that many things you can do. You can build basically turrets and power stations, and then buildings to move that power away from your just your small base in the beginning. And so really the real-time strategy bit, all you're doing is expanding, and there's really not a lot of like resource gathering, for instance. It's just an automatic stream of resources as you capture points and such. So the real-time strategy bit, while the commander's role is very vital, it's really not that complicated. You do get abilities like blasting little areas with explosions, or calling in artillery strikes, and placing poison gas and stuff like that. But your main priority is going to be expanding your base and giving your the people that are running around on the ground their orders. And that's the first-person shooter component, where you can pick one of 4 classes: the Assault, the Exo, the Stealth, or the Support. And each of these has different loadouts that you can access, and then of course customize with different gizmos that you'll get as you progress through the ranks. This does have rank progression, like in, say, Call of Duty, for instance. But unlike that, when you level up, you get access to different gizmos or different loadouts and such like that. Whereas in, say, Call of Duty, you'd be able to get to different things to customize all your classes and such. This one is a very class-driven game. You're going to have very specific roles depending on what class you play. The Exo, for instance, has 2 basic loadouts. You're either the Siege or the Suppression. With Suppression, you're given a chain gun, or I should say minigun, where your primary role is just to mow everything down in your way. And the Siege role is to destroy enemy buildings. Kind of simple. Stealth role, I didn't really play much of that. I didn't particularly like it. They get really low health, but they're really fast, and they're also able to cloak. So that's their primary role, is to sneak behind enemy lines and sabotage and such. Then, of course, the Assault class can be one of 3 different things. You're either an infantryman with an assault rifle, a grenadier with a grenade launcher and a shotgun, or a marksman with a sniper rifle. Fairly simple stuff. And the Support class can either be a medic, a engineer, which you repair or destroy enemy buildings, and there's also the I don't remember the exact name of it, but you basically get a flamethrower and just burn everything out. So each class has its own specific roles, its own specific play style, and that's pretty nice, actually, because you do actually have to keep in mind how each is meant to be played. The Assaults, for instance, are really good counters for stealth because they have the ability to hit on thermal vision and see where the scouts are. Whereas Exos can basically lock down their suit. They dig in, and they get very little spread with their weaponry. And so they can basically become walking turrets. And they're also really useful for taking down enemy turrets and such, which become a very big nuisance for the people running around on the ground. They also have a very large amount of health, but they're also really slow. And then, of course, Support's fairly self-explanatory. Medics are going to run around healing people. The engineers are going to run around repairing buildings or taking them down if they're the enemies and such like that. Gunplay actually feels pretty decent. It doesn't feel amazing, but all of the weapons have their own specific traits. They all feel very different from each other, although fully automatic weapons do kind of blend together in some ways. And some classes feel a little overpowered if you're playing as certain classes or your commander is completely horrible. But there really is a very nice balance in this game. The classes themselves are all very well balanced out. There's nothing that's really truly overpowered or underpowered per se. Each has its own specific roles, and people just excel at one thing where they don't excel at another. What the really big problem is that people don't play as a team in this game. And commanders tend to be really, really bad at their jobs. So you'll have the people who are being commanders and they have really no idea what they're doing, and they're just not listening to their teams, because the team will, if they're playing well, then they're going to say, hey commander, we need a supply station up here, we need a forward spawn point, or we need a turret up here, or something like that. And a good commander will say, okay, I'm going to try to put that down there as soon as I can, if they are sorting out like power issues or something. And they will move up with what their team needs. Whereas bad commanders tend to be completely oblivious and just not really do anything that they're supposed to do. Or you'll go up against a really good commander and just get your ass completely handed to you. So there is a lot of frustration in this game, especially if you're running around on the ground and suddenly you've run around a corner that used to be yours and there's a bunch of turrets there that just wipe you out in a few shots. So that becomes a pretty big problem, but that's only because of the nature of the beast. A lot of people playing first-person shooters don't really know what to do in a real-time strategy game. So it makes sense that these people, when they're put into a thing beyond their comfort zone, they don't understand it, they don't really know what to do. Still, it's really irritating, and that's my major downfall with this game. While it is a really solid concept, the idea itself has been proven before with Savage. But while it is a solid concept, it has been proven to work. You have to have the right players, and Nuclear Dawn doesn't. The player base for this thing is either people who just kind of jumped in because of a free weekend, or the people who've been following it for a while and really know what they're doing. And if you're with the people who know what they're doing, then it's a blast to play. It actually is really, really well balanced. It's really fun, and you'll actually find that the experience is very nice. But if you're with the majority of people, which are the people who don't really know what they're doing, then you're going to be immensely frustrated. But overall, I'd say that's a pretty minor problem. And this game actually does come across very well, but that one major flaw is what really brings it down. I give it a 3.5 out of 5. Thanks for watching.